Hi, everybody. Welcome to our RISE review. I'm going to go ahead and get this meeting started. So I'm Megan Moeller. We'll be reviewing RISE and specifically advising for transition classes and co-requisite classes, as well as how to talk to students about these courses. Heather Collins from Basic Skills is joining us, as well as Tamika Tyner. Allison Naylor, Monty Fowler from Student Success and Advising are with us, and Kara Potter and Rebecca will be with us as well. So, all right, so as a quick overview, just to talk about, remind everybody what RISE is. It's how we are now doing developmental education, which isn't what it's called anymore, but just to put it in perspective. So RISE stands for Reinforced Instruction for Student Excellence. Its purpose is to decrease the time students are in developmental instruction and so they can graduate earlier, as well as be more successful in all their classes. So there's 3 placement pathways. It's all primarily based on high school GPA. If they have a 2.199 high school GPA or below, they'll start in transition classes for math and English. If they have a 2.2 to 2.799 high school GPA, they'll take their gateway class with a co-requisite. And if they have a 2.8 GPA or higher, it's the gateway only. Recent studies have come out from Complete College America, and it shows that co-requisite instruction is superior to prerequisite remediation. So what we're doing is definitely, from what studies are showing, helpful for students in terms of being more successful and graduating on time or in less time. So Heather and Tamika, I'll turn it over to y'all to talk about transitions.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. One of the things that we want to point out with our transition classes is that language is definitely important in how we address these classes. We want the students to understand and know that it's not remediation. It's not because they're not smart. It's just that they need reinforced instruction to help them be successful in their curriculum classes. So we want to make sure that we're using language such as supplemental, reinforced, increased learning, review of fundamentals that they will need to be successful, to enhance their writing skills and their writing ability. We want them to feel empowered to take these classes and not defeated. There is a stigmatism with students when you say, well, we're going to send you to transition classes over at Basic Skills. Well, yes, at the end of the day, we are Basic Skills. However, we are academic and career readiness. And so what we want to begin to do is make sure that we are singing the same song out the same book and addressing it as academic and career readiness. This is one of the opportunities that we have to make sure that a student is successful, and success is what we do here at JCC. Their success is our success. And so we want them to feel comfortable. So please be cognizant of the words that you are using when advising your students. And again, we want to stay away from remediation. We want to stay away from those words that give it a negative connotation so that they are already not defeated in their mindset when they come to take the classes with us. So again, Megan has reviewed that when we advise for transition courses, we are checking the high school GPA. Anything less than a 2.2 will require transition courses. Take a moment to look in STAC and colleague And if you do not see the English 002 and or the Math 003, they will need to have a transition course. And you also may have to take a look at placement test scores to help navigate and guide your decision. And of course, when all else fails, or if you're not sure, at the end of the presentation, there's a couple of phone numbers that you can call, and one of us will be able to assist you. Okay, so when students are being advised and they're preparing for transition courses, the student will meet with the advisor. And again, please make sure that you are checking their GPA, checking the stack screen, and checking the GED score if needed. Okay, I can provide GED scores, and I can provide the explanation of a GED score if that is needed. There is a transition course placement form in OnBase that that the advisor will have to complete. Students do not self-register for transition courses. And it is extremely important for you all to complete this form and make sure that the boxes are checked. If you are unsure of if they need tier 2 or tier 1 or tier 3, there is a comment section on the form, the OnBase form, where you can write a little note under comments, and that will help me to decipher what that student needs, as well as making sure that their primary program is filled out on that OnBase form. Once the form is completed, it comes directly to me, and then I schedule the student for their transition courses. I will call them and give them the opportunity to decide what class times that they would like to take the class, and I register them on the spot at that moment. And I'm going to shoot back over to Megan.
Okay, so, oh, sorry, Heather.
Yes, no, you're right. Go ahead.
Okay, so the registration process for transitions is a little different than for co-recs and gateways. Like Heather just said, they do not self-register in WebAdvisor. They will have to contact Heather in order to do that. Heather, I don't know if you want to go through and say specifically the registration process from start to finish.
Sure. So once I get the OnBase form and I contact the student then is scheduled to come to class on the first day. From the time of registration to the time of the first class, a student will receive multiple emails from our department, especially from Tamika Tyner, who is our RISE coordinator. That student is reminded of their class time and location, and that they need to show up in order to register. Students that are enrolled in transition classes register in the class. That's the difference between the academic and career readiness and curriculum. Our students register in the class. They fill out all of their registration forms that particular day. Not only do they fill out the registration forms, but they have to sign a roster. And there are two different types of testing that have to be done. There is the TABE testing that is a requirement for our department for them to take. That is what allows us to offer the transition courses for free, is that they have to take this TABE test pre and post. Also, they then have to take their diagnostic test, which is either a math diagnostic or an English language diagnostic test. And then they attend class for the first 2 weeks face-to-face. It is imperative that you share with the students when advising that they're going to have to attend class for the first 2 weeks. This helps us teach the student how to navigate the EdReady system, Blackboard Collaborate, where we make sure that we get all of the tests done, the paperwork filled out. They're able to get comfortable with their instructor, and ask any questions that they need in order to be able to facilitate their learning once they get at home or they're doing it remotely. So it is imperative that they know that the first 2 weeks they are required. As always, our classes are 3 days a week for 2 hours. So we're not asking a lot the first 2 weeks, but it is important that they are there. Once the students come into the class and they complete their paperwork, they are then able to work at their own pace. Our RISE instructors hold classes synchronously so that if there are questions, comments, concerns, they can attend class, they can work on their own. There are videos that they can go back and watch, and everything is there in Blackboard. Once a student completes their requirements or their modules or their tiers, whichever one you like, in the EdReady site, they are then ready to post-test. And once they have post-tested, their grade is then submitted and they will be allowed to register for their gateway courses. If a student does not complete their post-TABE, they are given an incomplete. Okay, they are given an incomplete until that post-test is done, and then they are able to move on. Any questions about transitions? And feel free to type questions in the chat box for those of you that are on. Okay, so thank you for helping us navigate the process of transitions. It seems a little cumbersome, but it's really simplistic once the student gets in there and we follow the steps and the processes. If you have any questions after this, we'll open up again for questions, but then you could always reach out.
Thank you, Heather. We'll go on to co-requisites now. So co-requisites are the support class that goes along with the gateway if the student has to take a co-requisite. So the goal for co-requisites are to become stronger in their English and math and be more successful as they go on. English especially is important because they'll be writing in just about every subsequent class that they take. So all English 111s, well, not all, English 111 is the English that has the co-requisite with it. And then the other maths also have the co-requisite. And depending on the student's program of study determines what math they'll be taking. Now, when you're determining placement or trying to see where the student is, I think one of the best places to look is in STACK. And there you can see waivers, or for new students, the JCC admission summary is really good to look at because it'll have where their primary placement is. Now, some students will have to take the placement test. Not a lot. It's just students who have their adult high school diploma, their high school equivalency diploma, or foreign transcripts. Other than that, everyone is placed based on their high school GPA. When RISE first came out, they were only using GPAs from 10 years or sooner. Now they have determined that we can use transcripts that are older than 10 years indefinitely. So until further notice, the 10-year rule is not in place anymore. Okay. So, we'll talk about registering for co-requisites. And Dina, I see you're on the training, so if you want to jump in and give more details about registration, then that would be great. One of the things that we need to know is that this time around, the registrar's office is not going to be registering students for their gateway and their co-requisite. We still need the section numbers on the advising plan, however. So one thing for students to really need to know is that they have to register for the co-requisite first. Once that happens, they will receive a pop-up message on WebAdvisor, and it will tell them which gateway they need to register for. Another thing the student needs to know is if they drop the co-requisite or gateway, then they will be dropped from the other one as well. Dina, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, that covers it correctly. The reason for the registering for the co-rec first is because it is tied to the specific gateway course. That way we knew we had fewer students that would be registering for the co-rec as compared to the gateway. This way it allowed any student that didn't need the co-rec to be able to register freely for the gateway courses needed.
Okay, thank you. And one good thing to do is to advise students to only take one gateway or co-rec pair per semester. These classes are very contact hour heavy, especially some of the maths. So if they are taking both English and math in one semester, that can really be a heavy caseload for them or course load for them. So if they're strong in English, they may want to start out with that. If they're in a program that is more math heavy, they may want to start out with the math. Rebecca and Kara, do you guys have anything that you want to say about the co-requisites, how they've been going, and what students have been saying about them?
I don't know if Rebecca, I'll go ahead. The biggest issue that I've had because I do both the Gateway English 111 courses and the 011, the co-rec courses. I am very hopeful that this new way we have paired the courses and what Dina just said about the registering the co-recs, it's going to fix some of these problems. But the biggest problem is students don't seem to understand for English that these are two separate courses. So I've had lots of students who've been doing what they're supposed to do in 111 and ignoring 011. Well, that's a problem because it's two separate classes. So I try to explain to them what we learn in 111, we practice in 011. Now, some of this may be better once we're face-to-face. It's been a little bit difficult doing all this online, and some of it synchronous, some of it not. So students really need to understand that these are two separate classes, and then Megan has said before, they get dropped from one or they drop themselves from one, they will get dropped from both. So it is imperative that they understand that they will receive a grade for 011 just like they will for 111, other than it's a pass-fail kind of thing. So 70% and higher, they pass out of the co-rec. But they do have to maintain their attendance and all of the assignments in both of the classes. And as Megan said, it is pretty intense. That's 6 hours of English. It can be a lot more for math, but 6 hours of English a week in class is a lot to do. And that's about it.
I would just add for math, I guess the biggest challenge we've had this past year is students not being in the correct pairing. Instead of being in the students who are in a co-requisite class may be coming from various gateway classes, which is not how it's designed to work, because then their gateway class may be in slightly different places for the different students that are making up the same co-rec class. So that's just an added challenge to the instructor trying to teach the co-requisite to those students coming from various gateway sections. But hopefully this new registration process will help to eliminate some of those issues. But I guess just the biggest emphasis, just to be sure that the students understand that when they pick that pair, that the pair goes together, and that they need to be registered for a gateway and co-rec pair that matches up together. But I would just agree with everything Kara said in regards to the math. It is a lot of course hours for a student to be taking a gateway math course. That alone is a lot of credit hours and then adding the co-rec hours on top of it. Just be aware of that when advising them about additional classes that they need to take, to not overload themselves with other classes, because there's going to be a lot of time that they need to devote just to the English and co-rec, or just to the math and co-rec. And I'll just throw this out there: if you run into any questions, issues, concerns, trying to figure out what to do about a student's math class and their co-rec and aren't sure how to advise a student, please feel free to reach out to me by email. I'm more than happy to try to answer any questions or help if you need assistance with that.
I'd like to chime in and say, on the back end of what Rebecca stated, please understand that the transition classes as well are a heavy load. So while you're scheduling classes, please leave room for the transitions class.
Thank you, Heather, for saying that. The transitions are definitely a lot more work than they may seem like. Heather, do you mind kind of describing what a student goes through with the math and English, like the modules and tiers?
Sure. 1 second so I can grab them. So of course, we discussed the fact that when a student starts with us, they are working with the diagnostic testing first. When in an English transition course, they are learning to develop demonstrated knowledge of print concepts, phonetic awareness, word analysis, develop vocabulary skills, including analyzing word structure, a variety of comprehension strategies to derive meaning from literary, functional, and informational texts. They're demonstrating a wide range of knowledge with increasing complex literature and information structures and text. Unit Tier 1 by itself covers introduction to college reading and writing, identifying main ideas, discovering implied meaning, interpreting bias, analyzing through definition, and learning across disciplines. And then with Tier 2 for the English, they are exploring comparative elements, informed opinions through causal chains, applied critical analysis, and using sources in critical reading and writing. And so that's just English by itself, with Unit 6 and 9 being the longest units that have to be completed for a student. In math, excuse me, let me switch my screen real quick. In math, Tier 1 goes from whole numbers to fractions and decimals, ratios, proportions, geometry, and real numbers. Tier 2 is solving equations and inequalities, graphing, exponents, polynomials, and concepts in statistics. And then Tier 3 is factoring systems of equations and inequalities, rational expressions, radical expressions, and quadratic equations, and functions. So again, it's an extensive unit. These students have to take pre-assessments in each area to make sure that they have gained comprehension and mastery, and it's quite a bit of work.
Thank you, Heather. And I appreciate you emphasizing how much work that is. And also, if a student needs to take transition English and math, it is a good idea to talk to them about taking both in the same semester. Usually it's a better idea for them to take one each semester. And I also want to just give some advice on how to determine at advising what tier the student is in at the time. So back when we were advising for DMAs and DREs, when the student came in, we didn't necessarily know if they would pass the whole sequence. So this is kind of like with transitions. The student will know what tier they're in, so it would be best to advise based on where they are at that time. So if the student, you can kind of get a feel if they feel like they will get through all their tiers. If they do, for example, for English 111, if they get through tier 2, then they can go ahead and take English 111 the next semester without a co-requisite. But if they're feeling like they're not going to get through both tiers, then they will need to take the co-requisite the next semester. So when you're talking to the student, they're in the middle of their transitions, they're not sure what's going to happen, just advise based on if this happens, then you can take this. But if this happens, then you have to take this in the spring, fall, whatever. Now that could cause problems in terms of section numbers. So I think it'd be good to tell the student, if you pass your tiers and you know what you may have to do, please contact me. And if you have questions about what section you need to be taking the next semester. So there can be a little bit of confusion with how to accurately advise for transitions for students who are in transitions. So it's kind of like, it's not necessarily a exact science, I guess you could say, but just, you know, work with what you have and do your best. One thing we wanted to also talk about were tips on how to speak to students about these classes. Heather already went over some language that we can use, and I think it is very important for, if a student does have to take transitions, to say that it'll be taken in academic and career readiness. Basic skills, like Heather said, can have kind of a negative connotation, even though it's not a negative thing. But if you call it academic and career readiness, which is the correct term, then that gives it a different kind of feeling. Also, being positive about telling the student about taking these classes, co-requisites and transitions, is going to make a difference. You can say, this doesn't have anything to do with how smart you are. It's a state requirement. So that places it not on the student, but on the state, basically. It's nobody's fault, which, it is a state requirement, so it doesn't have to do anything with the student being smart or not. Like I said, using positive language, calling the co-requisites and transitions like support classes, support labs, or a refresher. And also just saying, this is information you already know. We just have to reinforce and make sure that you're as successful as you can be in your studies at JCC. So everything's just going to build on top of one another and help them in their future classes. Does anyone have any tips or things that they've said to students to explain transitions and co-requisites to them?
I don't know that this is particularly helpful, but I do just remind students that all of this is to make them successful. And whether it's math or English, they're going to have to get through a lot of classes that require math and being able to read actively and understand what they've read, as well as writing. And so, yes, they may have to do a little bit of extra, but in the big grand scheme of everything, the goal is to get them the job that they want or get them the career that they want. And so it's just a matter of, this is what it takes. And, these co-req classes are a lot of work, but they don't include homework. for the face-to-face classes. So it is just, the name of the game is not making straight A's necessarily, but getting you through so that you can be successful in any of the classes that you take. And I always tell my writing students, you know, it's not about making an A. It's about when whatever teacher says you have to write this, in your brain, you're like, I got this. Might not be my favorite thing to do, but I know what to do and how to do it. I don't know about math.
That's a great point, Kara. I mean, just saying this is going to help you no matter what, I think is a good thing, and just being very positive. I think really that's the bottom line. And also, if you're not sure how to explain it, there's nothing wrong with contacting any of us to ask us if we can explain it better or give more information or something like that. I really don't mind helping in any way that is needed. You know, it's always better to be able to get these students through correctly the first time around than have it messed up the next semester, which then defeats the purpose of co-requisites and transitions, of having them graduate sooner and all that good stuff. So are there any questions about RISE in general that maybe we haven't covered in this presentation, things that you've just thought about or ran into these past couple semesters? I do want to say one thing. I feel like we've been doing an excellent job. I haven't heard of any complaints from students about advisors misadvising them or anything like that. I feel like you guys are doing an awesome job at reaching out if you do have questions. That just shows me how dedicated you are to our students' success.
So I have a question or comment, and none of you know who I am. So I'm Jason Morgan. I'm an adjunct. I've been an adjunct there for 7 years. But I am actually I'm the department head of general education at Shaw University, but I still teach at JCC. And I was really interested in this because we're trying to make things better at Shaw as well. But I'm also trying to understand the students that I'm teaching in 111. So 2 questions about RISE that came up from this. As you guys have kind of piloted it and done it for the last little bit, as I've talked to other teachers and instructors, one concern that I heard was the fact that sometimes what's being taught in the co-rec doesn't necessarily jive up with what's happening in the gateway. And I know that I've heard that JCC is, again, when you said you've kind of changed it now, so the trend, so it's like they have to register for the co-rec first. So is that same teacher going to be teaching the co-rec and the gateway? Is that the plan? Is that what the change is? Did I misunderstand?
I can answer that. So given that we're in the pandemic and all this started in the fall when everybody, you know, nobody quite knew what was going on, it does not have to match. The gateway instructor does not have to be the same as the co-rec instructor, but we are trying it both ways. And what should happen is you should have one gateway instructor and one O11 instructor or co-rec instructor, because as Rebecca pointed out, when the gateways and the co-recs don't match up, there's no blending of the courses. So it is imperative that you have a gateway instructor and a co-rec instructor who are working together to make sure that what is going on in O11 in English specifically is what's going on in 111. But so far, these last 2 semesters, I've oftentimes I've had a gateway class and there are 3 or 4 or 5 different instructors. There's nothing I can do to make those courses blend. So what I have done is just with my developmental education background, had them working on things that I knew they would need, skills that they would need. But ideally, you should have those 2 instructors communicating with each other and they work together. And that's what it's supposed to be like. That has not been what it's been like. But my hope is that some of these changes we've made for the fall are going to make a difference.
All right, thank you for that response. Because that was my biggest concern when I was learning about RISE is, making sure that, because one is supporting the other, and if there's no communication, you may be teaching them things in 111 that they haven't really been reinforced yet in 011. And so there's that whatever. So it sounds like you guys have a great plan as far as that goes. The other comment that people talked about, and I kind of hear this a little bit is, and I see this from students, that students often look at school and college as little boxes they have to check. Oh, I have to get through this class, I have to get through this module, I have to get through this or whatever. And so whenever we have whenever I have a conversation with a student, I said, look, the most important thing you're going to learn in college is how to learn. And this is not, it's not about checking off boxes. It's for you to be successful. And we want to make sure you're as successful as possible. So I think, trying to get away from the check boxes, because then they're not really seeing this as an investment in themselves. And I think if we can help them understand, look, also you're going to get out of this class what you put into it. If you can skate by and do the very minimum possible, but then that, and a degree may get you the job, but getting an education will actually help you keep the job and be successful at the job. So those are just two of my little comments, and also just to say hello to everyone at JCC.
Thank you. Those are very insightful comments. Anybody have anything else? Well, does any of my co-presenters, do you want to add anything or have any parting thoughts?
No, this is Monty Fowler, one of the Senior Success Advisors. I just want to echo what Megan said, that if you ever have any questions or just want someone to double check or need some more explaining, that I'm also here and able to answer questions and more than happy to help out.
Likewise, just wanted to echo that sentiment and say thank you to everyone for all of the work that you do to make our students successful. It's been a pleasure navigating this first year with you all. I think we have done well. I do want to say one thing. In looking at the success rates of our students, we are coming to learn that sometimes it takes the student a little bit longer than one semester to complete these transition courses. And that is definitely based upon what that GPA is and how long that they have been out of school. And so in encouraging them to take the RISE classes or the RISE transition classes, try to encourage them to take it first. Many of them have put it off. They try to take all of the classes that they can take without having to do the RISE classes, when essentially the whole purpose of the transition is to support them in their learning. So we want to encourage them to take it first, not to put it off, and allow them to know that it's going to help them in the long run. Even though for some of them, it may take just a little bit longer, but still the moment that they finish, as long as there's opportunity, they can enroll directly into their next set of classes.
Thank you for saying that, Heather. I think that's really good for us to keep in mind for sure. Well, if nobody has anything else to say, any comments or questions, then we'll go ahead and wrap this up. But I'm always available if you have any questions. Kara, Rebecca are available for any questions, as well as Heather, Tamika, Monty, and Allison. They definitely know a lot as well.